is saying that how if he is doing any activity, he is not desiring any fruits for that, and therefore is not bound by this karma.
Right. So it's inspiring Arjuna to perform
Niskam.
Nishkam Karma Yoga. Okay, 2 points.
Then we discussed about the military training. That one has to follow that. So
For
that
what?
during the crisis situation, that one have to think and act. So following, so Arjuna's duty is to follow directly whatever Krishna is telling.
Okay, good.
We also learned about Chaturvarna Maya system in that verse, that different people have different desires because they are influenced by different modes, and accordingly to engage people according to their guna and karma, the varnashram system has been instituted by Lord himself.
All right. So it's based on guna and karma and not
Janma.
birth. Yes. So on that point, you can read this.
Bhagavad Gita 4.13 by Vishwanath.
वो तो पढ़ लिया.
अच्छा.
हाँ, ये पढ़.
The human life is only meant for tattva jigyasa, to understand the absolute truth. That requires Brahminical culture, not the dull brain of Shudras and Chandalas. They cannot understand. Therefore, there must be an institution to educate a Brahman, to educate Kshatriya. That is required. Chaturvarna Maya Srishtam, Bhagavad Gita 4.13. If you don't do it, if you simply produce Shudras, bolt, nut manufacturers, technicians, then how can you be happy? Shudras. This is the business of the Shudras. This is not business of a Brahmana. You keep Shudras, but there must be Brahmanas also. Just like leg is also leg is also required, the brain is also required. You cut the leg, simply keep the brain. That is also defective. And if you cut off the brain, then everything is finished. This is going on. There is no Brahman, there is no Kshatriya, there is no Vaishya, only Shudras. So how you can be happy? Therefore, it is very essential to understand this verse. Chaturvarnyam, train a class of men, everyone required. There is intelligent class of men, but their brain is being misused. An intelligent man is being taught technology, how to manufacture machine. This is Shudra's business. This is Shudra's business. Misuse, brain misuse. There must be university where brain is properly utilized. Here is a child or here is a boy. He has good intelligence. Train him as a Brahmana. Less than that, train him as a Kshatriya. Train him as a Vaishya. Everything is there in Bhagavad Gita. There is no difficulty. So if you actually want happiness, prosperity of the society, not only of this society, that whole human society, they must accept this Krishna consciousness movement, and then they will be happy.
Right. So that was the emphasis which Srila Prabhupada gave, that in the present day society, it's mostly all Shudras, some Vaishyas, no Brahmanas, no Kshatriyas. So therefore, the emphasis was on at least create Brahmanas, the head, then something will come in order. So that was the emphasis. Yes.
Prabhuji, this in context of this Chaturvarnyam, generally we hear a lot of misunderstanding in the outside world about Vedic caste system. They say that Vedas recommend caste system, and which we understand is guna and karma, but they interpret it as janma karma.
Prabhupada says the caste system is perverted varnashram.
Perverted, yeah. So when they ask this question, they do give some reference from the scriptures. So just wanted some clarification on them. Like one example which they give is of Draupadi kind of not telling Karna is Sudra. So that was because Karna was doing Kshatriya activity. So then if he was doing karma was Kshatriya, then he should have been considered a Kshatriya. Why? Just because he's taking birth in the Sudra family, why he was labeled as a Sudra? So that was one question which comes often. And yeah, there are a few more also, but just wanted to clarification on like how to understand this aspect, that as you said, no, that with somebody is given a lower birth. So lower birth in the sense, then birth is given some importance at least. So how to understand this?
So we see in the Vedic times, so the people in general would follow samskaras. And because they would follow samskaras, the son of a Brahmana would naturally be trained to be a Brahmana. Son of a Kshatriya would naturally be trained to be a Kshatriya. And that's what we find in most cases. And so therefore, when somebody is the son of a Shudra, then it is obvious that he will have mostly Shudra qualities only. So therefore, Karna, people thought he's son of a Shudra. And so therefore, how can he have Kshatriya qualities? The probability was almost impossible for a Shudra to have Kshatriya qualities. Because that was the culture at that time. And especially not only just an ordinary Shudra, but there in that Swayamvar, the most expert Kshatriyas were there. So where is the comparison? Even if you say, okay, some Kshatriya qualities may be there. But then that was not a contest for even ordinary Kshatriyas. That was for top class Kshatriyas. So therefore, Karna was a sort of misfit there. So, because that was the culture in those days. The culture was that mostly somebody who was born in a Brahmana family would have Brahmanical qualities, because right from birth, the training was there, everything was there. But of course, exceptions could always be there. But because that was the sort of culture, so therefore Karna was refused.
So that means birth is also given due importance. It's not birth is neglected altogether.
Birth can be given importance when samskaras are performed. So if the Garbhadhan sanskar is performed, then the birth also has importance, because then that particular type of soul is attracted. But if no samskaras are performed, then janma jayate shudra. So Prabhupada says very clearly that even if there is a Brahmana husband, wife, they don't perform Garbhadhan sanskar, then the child born is definitely a Shudra. But in those days, all the samskaras were followed. And therefore, then in most cases, the child born of a Brahmana family would have Brahmanical qualities. So all that becomes relevant when the samskaras are performed. But now, nothing.
Scriptures, if we see example like Hiranyakasipu getting a son as Prahlad Maharaj. So Hiranyakasipu is Asuric, but his son is pure devotee. So how, like, from there, does the samskara come into picture, or like?
Say, exceptions.
Yeah.
So exceptions can't become the rule.
Yeah, mercy
Yes.
is there.
Narad Muni's mercy is there, and yeah, that's what I was just going to say. That. The story that when Prahlad was in the womb, then there was this parrot, right? Was speak.
Parrots, and they started chanting Vishnu's name.
Okay.
So then he was trying to flee them away, and he was very angry that he is the killer of my brother. And in that state of mind, he conceived Prahlad.
Yeah, that story is true. So, and of course, Narad Muni's mercy is also there. So those are exceptions. Those are exceptions.
In connection to that question, I was just asking. So, when we define, at least speaking about Vedic context during Mahabharata or during that times. So when we speak about Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, they have some kind of attributes and all, some kind of qualities to that personality. And
qualities and work, guna karma.
Guna and karma. So then sometimes we see, like, at some point in their own in their life, let's say now, we're taking an example as Karna. So, or any other warrior as such. So we have seen Mahabharata also in other places, some like people who are considered as Kshatriyas, at one point of time in some situations, they have not, fulfilled that, stature of being a Kshatriya. Maybe running in the war, showing the back, or maybe someone not upholding dharma for women, old age and old men and children. So do those instances make them like, let's say we say that gunas are a mixture of all these three, and said no, at no point of time you can say that someone is exclusively in this guna. So can that apply to the varna as well?
Yes. Just like the Shastra says, Ashwathama, he was a son of Dronacharya Brahmana, but by his activity, he became what? Dvijabandhu. By killing the 5 sons of Draupadi, he is described as Dvijabandhu, because though he is born in Brahmana family, he didn't act like a Brahmana. So therefore, if somebody is born in a Brahmana family, may have the Brahmanical qualities, but then if he does something which is not according to the code of conduct of a Brahmana or a Kshatriya, then he becomes Brahmabandhu, Kshatrabandhu. So everything has to fall in line. Everything has to fall in place. So an occasional mistake is understood, but then something as heinous as killing sleeping sons, no, it's too much. So then, yes, then he falls down from his position because of that activity. Okay, fine. So now we'll proceed ahead. So we saw how Krishna expertly once again brought the entire discussion back to Nishkam Karma Yoga. Now, Krishna further analyzes Nishkam Karma Yoga and also presenting the higher stages of Nishkam Karma Yoga, where the person is like a jnani. He has developed more and more jnana. Okay, from Saranand to me, a summary of this section is given. Please read.
In the next 9 verses, 16 to 24, in pursuance of Krishna's description of his own work, Krishna will explain how work, karma, can be seen as inactivity, akarma. Arjuna previously said he wished to leave the battlefield and avoid the results of his karma, like a gnani, through inactivity. Krishna will show him that no karma accrues to one who works in transcendental knowledge, and that properly performed karma can thus be seen as non-different from the process of jnana.
Yes, so that's the summary. That's what he's going to describe. Okay, fine. 16th verse. Kim karma karmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tatte karma pravakshyami yajñatva mokshase shubhat. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. So here Krishna is saying, Kim karma kim akarmeti kavayopyatra mohita. What is karma? What is akarma? What activity is binding? What activity is liberating? Is very difficult even for kavayo, even for the very intelligent class of people, very difficult to understand. Even they are bewildered in understanding what is karma and what is akarma. We have example of how even Yudhishthira Maharaj, when he was told to tell lies, he got confused. Krishna is telling to tell lies? Will this be binding or liberating? He couldn't understand, but he was confused. So therefore, to understand what is right action and what is wrong action is not always so much black and white. And sometimes it will be very confusing. Many times that story is also told of the butcher who was running behind the cow, and then there was a Brahmana on the way, and then they asked the Brahmana, where did the cow go? And then the Brahmana showed. Then as a result of that, he had to face reaction for showing. So he was trying to tell the truth as a Brahmana, but then because he facilitated the killing of a cow, then there was reaction. So, not so easy. Dharma samuda chetaha. So one can study the books, but then when it comes to application, in that particular situation, what to do? Krishna himself is saying, Kavayopyatra mohita. Very intelligent people also can get bewildered. Not ordinary people, even intelligent people can get bewildered. What is the right course of action? And sometimes situations are such, there's not much time to think, right? One has to make immediate decisions. And sometimes decisions could affect huge population of people or devotees. And one wrong decision could affect so many. So, therefore, the application of dharma in life is always not so easy. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada is giving the solution to this in the purports. And what is the solution? To act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in a line of disciplic succession as explained in the beginning of this chapter. And so therefore, the basic solution is what? In the next paragraph, Prabhupada is right. Okay, or in the second paragraph itself. Therefore, one has to follow in the footsteps of previous authorities in the line of disciplic succession. Otherwise, even the most intelligent men will be bewildered regarding the standard actions of Krishna consciousness. For this reason, the Lord decided to instruct Arjuna in Krishna consciousness directly. Because of the direct instruction of the Lord to Arjuna, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna is certainly not bewildered. And then in the next paragraph, Prabhupada talks about the Mahajans, Mahajano yena gatasapanta. By mental speculation, one cannot ascertain what is religion or self-realization. Therefore, out of causeless mercy to his devotees, the Lord explains directly to Arjuna what action is and what inaction is. Only action performed in Krishna consciousness can deliver a person from the entanglement of material existence. So therefore, Mahajano yena gatasapanta. So following in the footsteps of the Mahajans, the previous Acharyas, is very important. And especially for us to follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada as our founder Acharya and the Acharya for the present age, because Srila Prabhupada successfully spread Krishna consciousness in the modern age. So therefore, reading about his life and seeing how Srila Prabhupada acted in various situations is very important for us. So both Srila Prabhupada's instructions and his Leela, both are very important for us, because through his Leela, through his activities, we can understand how Srila Prabhupada acted in various situations. And that will also help us to follow in his footsteps and make decisions accordingly. So these are some very important points. Otherwise, it's not so easy to understand what is the right action, what is wrong action. And in the next verse, Krishna continues on with the same point. Karmano hi api bodhavyam, bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha, Akarmanascha bodhavyam gahana karmano gatihi. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Bodhavyam. Bodhavyam means should understand. So one should understand karman, what is karman, karma, what is vikarma, and what is akarma. Karmano hi api bodhavyam, bodhavyam cha vikarmana, akarmanascha bodhavyam. And then he says, gahana karmano gati. Very hard to understand, very difficult to understand. Therefore, Prabhupada writes here in this purport, to understand Krishna consciousness and action according to its modes, one has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme. That is, one who has learned perfectly knows that every living entity is an eternal servant of the Lord, and consequently one has to act in Krishna consciousness. The entire Bhagavad Gita is directed towards this conclusion. Any other conclusion against this conclusion and its attendant actions are vikarmas or prohibited actions. To understand all this, one has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. This is as good as learning from the Lord directly. Otherwise, even the most intelligent persons will be bewildered. So again, the same point Srila Prabhupada is repeating. One has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. So that's how one can learn how to apply Krishna consciousness in one's life. Okay. 18. Karmanya karmaya pashet akarmani cha karmaya sa buddhiman manusheshu sa yukta kritsna karma krit. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. So the English is a little tongue twister. But actually, if you see the Sanskrit, it is a little more easier to understand. Karmani akarma ya paschet. That means somebody is performing karma, but it is a karma. That means somebody is performing karma, somebody is performing action, but there is no reaction. That is the meaning of karmani akarma ya paschet. Akarmani cha karma yaha. Here, akarmani means no activity. So somebody is not performing any activity and he thinks that there will be no reaction. But still, it is karma because there is reaction. Somebody is not performing any activity and he's thinking, because I'm not performing any activity, there's no reaction. But actually there is reaction. It is as good as karma. So Krishna says one who understands the difference between what is actually karma and akarma, he is buddhiman, sa buddhiman manusheshu. Sa yukta kritsna karma krit. So such a person who understands the difference between karma and akarma is actually in the transcendental position, even though he may be engaged in all sorts of activities. So therefore, simply inaction does not mean there will be no reaction. Simply not performing activities does not mean there will not be any reaction. Why? We discussed this before. Okay, that is one point. Non-performance of prescribed duties itself is sinful. That's one point. What is another point? Okay, everyone has to work. That is correct. But then even if somebody does not perform any work, he's just sitting in one place. He is going through. So even if one is not performing any work, just sitting, just by his breathing, he's performing sin. And then what to speak of eating? By breathing, so many living entities are going inside. If you want, you can take a sample and see under the microscope. So, at every moment we are committing sinful activities. And what to speak of walking, cooking, and so on. At every moment, practice. So, therefore, simply not performing activity does not mean there will not be any reaction. Panchashuna, we discussed, no? Panchashuna. And therefore, Krishna said, in order to counteract Panchashuna, one must do what? Panchamahayagya. You remember Panchamahayagya? What are they? Deva, Brahma, Bhuta, Nir, Pitri. So, this is the reason why yajna needs to be performed. So, if one does not perform yajna, at every moment one is performing sinful activities. So, therefore, if somebody thinks, now just like the Prabhupada gives the example of the Jains. So, the Jains, they think that simply by tying some mask or something like that and not performing any activity, they'll be free from sinful reactions. No, it doesn't work that way. So therefore, one has to very clearly understand what is karma and what is akarma. So another translation of this verse, in order to avoid the sort of jugglery or tongue twister. So one devotee, he gave this translation. So one can say, one who can see no reaction in detached work and reaction in false renunciation is intelligent among men. One who can see no reaction in detached work and reaction in false renunciation is intelligent. So in detached work, the person is performing karma. He is performing karma, but there is no reaction. So that is the first case. Karmani akarma yapashyat. And the second is reaction in false renunciation. So apparently he has given up his karma. No karma, akarmani. He has given up his karma. But as we discussed before, that he may have given up his karma, taken karma sannyas, but if he is not qualified, then what's happening? Yes, then reactions, mithyachar. So therefore, akarmani, he is performing akarma, he is not performing any activity, but still there is a reaction because he is not yet purified. So in other words, one has to very clearly understand what is karma and what is akarma. So even within the realm of Krishna consciousness, then we find devotees performing so many activities. And Srila Prabhupada explains sometimes non-devotees may think, oh, what these devotees are doing, they are also going to the market, they're purchasing things, they're doing business, they're doing this, they're doing that. What's the difference? So what is the difference lies in the purpose, the consciousness with which it is done. So one can be doing many activities, as did Srila Prabhupada, so many activities. But then if it is being performed for Krishna's satisfaction, then there is no reaction. But if that same activity, when performed for one's own satisfaction, there will be a reaction. So therefore, what is karma and what is akarma entirely depends upon the consciousness with which an activity is done or not done. So that's the important point. And therefore, Prabhupada begins his purport by saying a person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bonds of karma. His activities are all performed for Krishna. Therefore, he does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he is engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. Further down, Prabhupada says, because everything is done for Krishna, he enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of this service. Those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of it. That last sentence is an important one. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. So that's the consciousness with which one should perform the work. Then there is no reaction. So this is the difference between karma and akarma. So in other words, Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, don't think simply by going to the forest, you'll be free from reaction and you'll be free from bondage. No. You can fight, but this fighting will have no reaction if it is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme. So in other words, Krishna is telling, you perform Nishkam Karma Yoga. Don't try to renounce your karma and go to the forest thinking that you'll be free from bondage. Okay. Okay, again from Sarindan to me.
One who sees inaction in action, action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Inaction in action refers to devotional service or activities performed only for Krishna's pleasure. Krishna's servant receive no material reaction for their service because they act as Krishna acts, without the contamination of seeking a reward for their work. Action in inaction is the opposite. A sannyasi without transcendental knowledge of Krishna may appear not to be performing work, but as a soul, he cannot avoid either activity or the entangled results of that activity. Devoid of transcendental knowledge about Krishna, he must act, but he cannot act in Krishna's service, for he has no knowledge of Krishna. He is thus liable to all reaction. For example, the sannyasi must breathe. He also must eat. He steps on living entities as he walks. All these activities have no transcendental basis for him, and thus reactions occur him.
Yes, so that's the point. So now, so therefore, one has to have the knowledge of this. One has to have knowledge of what is karma, what is akarma, how to act for the Supreme. So that knowledge is very important. If one does not have that correct knowledge, then one will be bewildered in understanding what is karma and akarma, and thus one can get bound in this material worlds. 19. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitaha jnanagnidagda karmanam tamahu panditam buddhaha. One is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of a desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burnt up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Okay. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitah. So one may be performing all types of activities, but kama sankalpa varjita. They're not performed with a desire for sense gratification. So when they're not performed with a desire for sense gratification, the result is what? Jnanagni dagda karmanam. Jnana agni. The jnana, when the activity is performed in knowledge that I am performing this activity for the Supreme. So here the example is being given of wood and fire. So what is the wood? The wood is the work. And the fire is knowledge. So just like when the wood is put on fire, then what happens? The wood itself gets burnt. So in the same way, when work is performed in knowledge, the knowledge acts like fire. Jnanagni. Dagda karmanam. It burns the reactions to the work. It burns the reactions to the work. That's how that knowledge of the Supreme acts like a fire. And then there will not be any reactions to the work. So when one performs the work with the knowledge, with the intention, with the goal that this work I am performing for the satisfaction of the Supreme, then there will not be any reaction. But if there is kama sankalpa, that means if the work is performed for sense gratification, there will be what? Reaction. This principle is very important for us also. So if we also, as we are performing our activities in Krishna consciousness, to the degree there is fruitive mentality means what? Kama. That is what is kama, sense gratification. So to the degree there is fruitive mentality, to that degree there will be reactions. Then one has to face the consequences. But then when the activity is performed only for the pleasure of Krishna, then no reactions. Because Krishna burns away the reactions. The reactions all get burnt away. So there's no effect. Because one is solely performing the activity for the pleasure of Krishna. Then whatever is the reaction of that, good or bad, that Krishna deals with it. So Krishna gets the reaction and we get the yoga. Yoga means what? Yes, connection or the relationship with Krishna is established. We get the yoga, and as far as the reaction is concerned, that Krishna takes. But if we don't act for the satisfaction of Krishna, then there's no yoga and we have to face the reaction. Therefore, to come to the platform of pure devotional service and act only for the satisfaction of Krishna is very important. Okay, now in the next 3 verses, Krishna describes the symptoms of a karma yogi who is acting on this platform of knowledge. The symptoms of a karma yogi who is acting in knowledge or who is acting for the Supreme. What are his symptoms? That's what is being described in the next 3 verses. Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashrayah karmanyabhi pravrittopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Purport?
Purport.
This freedom from the bondage of action is possible only in Krishna consciousness. When one is doing everything for Krishna, a Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before.
How many times Prabhupada used the word Krishna in the purport? Oh, almost a dozen times it looks like. Huh? Okay, 6. And how many times Krishna is there in the verse? Nowhere. The verse is not talking anything about Krishna. And Prabhupada has written half a dozen times, has written Krishna there. That's a problem. So we have to understand that when Krishna is speaking the verses, he's speaking about whom? About whom? What is the context? What is the verses talking about? We just said it. Who? Yes, Karma Yogi. What is being spoken about is a Nishkam Karma Yogi. So the Nishkam Karma Yogi may not have the full understanding of Krishna and working for Krishna. He may not have that full understanding, but yet he definitely works for the Supreme. His knowledge of the Supreme may be impersonal, maybe Paramatma, maybe Bhagwan. He doesn't have a clear understanding, right? But he is acting for the Supreme, for the absolute truth. But then again, Srila Prabhupada doesn't get into technical details. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada gives a Krishna conscious purport. And so the purport is, of course, most applicable for devotees. For devotees, the purport is very much applicable. And so therefore, for all of us, it's definitely applicable. But we have to know that the context that Krishna is speaking is about a Nishkam Karma Yogi. But as we already discussed before, all the principles apply to a devotee as well. So, Tyaktva Karma Phalasangam. So, he gives up all attachment to what? The phal, the fruits. Nitya Tripta is always satisfied. Nirashrayaha. He has no other shelter except the shelter of the Supreme. No other shelter. And Karmani Abhi Pravritto Api. Even though he is engaged in karma, even though he's engaged in so many activities, but na eva kinchit karoti saha, but actually he's not acting at all. Even though he's performing so many activities, he's not acting. That means he's not getting reaction to those activities. And as Prabhupada says that a Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality. Prabhupada is directly coming from Nishkam Karma Yoga, is coming right to the transcendental platform. Pure love for Krishna. And therefore, he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. So what should we do? We should protect this building or no? We have so much security, this, that, why? Prabhupada is saying devotee should not even be concerned about personal maintenance, protection of the things that he has. Right. So the consciousness is, this building is not mine. It is whose? Krishna's. There's one lecture where Srila Prabhupada explains, it's not that a devotee becomes irresponsible. Not that, okay, this building doesn't belong to me, leave the gate open, let the thieves come and steal everything, doesn't matter. No, not like that. A devotee understands that everything belongs to Krishna. And therefore, he is very careful to use everything in Krishna's service, to protect everything in Krishna's service. A devotee is even more careful because it does not belong to me. So therefore, we see how Srila Prabhupada was so careful about everything, about using everything in Krishna's service, maintaining everything. So, there are many pastimes in that connection. One Srila Prabhupada was in Juhu, and there was one loft which they had in those days. You know what's a loft, right? So there's a room on top of that. It's little like something like a storeroom they had, loft. And so it was like a storeroom, not something which is used every day. And they hoped that Srila Prabhupada would never see that place. But one day, all of a sudden, Srila Prabhupada went there. And so, they had dumped some old Prabhupada books over there. Those which were torn and things like that. They dumped them there. And so Srila Prabhupada went and he saw that how there were books with pictures of Krishna, Arjuna, his own pictures. They were all scattered here and there. And Prabhupada was wild. Prabhupada said, who is maintaining this? Who is doing this? So, Srila Prabhupada chastised those managers. So we see in Prabhupada's life how Srila Prabhupada was so careful about every small thing, how everything is used properly in Krishna's service. So when we see that connection to Krishna, then yes, then one is very careful. So when it's said here, he's not anxious to secure things, not to protect things already in his possession, it means that something which one is maybe using for one's own sense gratification. But he does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. And such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. Okay, 21. निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्व परिग्रह शारीरम केवलम कर्म कुर्वन्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम. Such a man of understanding acts with minor intelligence, perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Purport.
A Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad result in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it is not moved out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna conscious person is always doubted with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part required oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna conscious man maintain himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental living service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all reaction of his endeavor like an animal. He has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person, fully engaged in self realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material objects. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not therefore become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his action.
Yes. So these are further symptoms of such a Nishkam Karma Yogi who is acting on the platform of Gyan with knowledge. So Nirashi, Nirashi. This word came before also where? Yes. Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashi nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigatajvara. So same thing, nirashi. Without desire, no asha for the result. Nirashir yatachittatma. That means controlled mind and intelligence. So mind, intelligence, senses, everything is controlled. Tyakta sarva parigraha. Parigraha means sense of proprietorship. Same thing, mamatva. There, nirmamo, Krishna said. Same thing here also. Sarva parigraha. That thinking that this is mine. Aham mameti. So the aham mameti one gives up. Shariram kevalam karma. So he performs karma for what? To keep body and soul together. That's all. Shariram kevalam karma. Not for sense gratification. Then the result of such action is what? Kurvan napnoti kilbisham. Then he's not affected by sinful reactions. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is giving example of an animal. Two examples Prabhupada is giving. What are the two examples? Yes. So just like one maintains the machine, oiling and repair and so on and so forth. So similarly, body is also like machine. So yes, so whatever is required to keep the machine going properly, one has to do that. So one should not neglect the body also. So therefore, appropriate food, rest, all that is required because we're using the machine in Krishna's service. So that much, whatever is required, that needs to be done. The other example is giving is of an animal to illustrate this proprietorship. So therefore he says that like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. So in that context, we can recollect the pastime of Sanatana Goswami who wanted to commit suicide by placing his body under the wheel of Lord Jagannath's Rath carts. And what did Mahaprabhu say? Yes. So Mahaprabhu said, how can you destroy somebody else's property? The body is not yours. How can you destroy somebody else's property? So that should be our consciousness while maintaining the body. That the body is not mine. It is given to me by Krishna for using in Krishna's service. That should be the consciousness while maintaining the body. So therefore, we cannot go into another extreme of not taking care of the body. So that is also another aspect or another side of attachment. So if I don't take care of the body, that also means I'm thinking the body is mine. So two extremes. So one extreme is overly taking care of the body. 2 hours in the gym every day. Today I was giving an example of gym. So if one is spending too much time for taking care of the body, then that is also bodily consciousness, thinking the body is mine. And if one totally neglects the body, then that is also another side of the same mentality. Body is mine. But the right understanding is what? The body is not mine. It is given to Krishna for using in Krishna's service. So therefore, whatever requires to be done to maintain the body needs to be done. But then but why is given the example of the animal? Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. And in that context, Srila Prabhupada told the story of I'm sure you have definitely heard this story in your school days of the dog and the mongoose. No? Snake? Not snake. Anybody heard? No? No. Okay, we'll begin the story, you'll remember. So there was this man who had this dog, very nice pet dog. Huh? Now you remember. So that's what Krishna consciousness is like that. It's all there, only it has to be awakened. By little Shravanam, then everything gets awakened. So you want to continue the story?
So one point of time, there was a small child in the home, and that was like the son of the owner of the house. So one fine day, that it's actually
okay. So one day the man had to go outside. So the mother also was not there, and he also had to go outside. So the child was alone, and so the man sort of entrusted the child to the dog. That means he told the dog to be over there and take care. So he had so much faith in the dog. So he kept the dog there, and he left. So then when the child was small baby was lying there, a mongoose came. And so the mongoose came to attack the child. So when the mongoose came to attack the child, the dog took the child and placed the child under the bed. And then the dog fought with the mongoose, dragged him into the garden, and killed him there. And then once again, the dog came back and sat near the child. So now the man came back. And when the man came back, so his first concern was, where is the child? He did not see the child. So he was looking around, where is the child? He saw the dog and he saw blood stains. So the man came to the conclusion that the dog ate the child. So he was furious. And coming to that conclusion, he took a gun, he pointed at the dog. Now, the important point is, the dog could have run away. But that's what Srila Prabhupada says, this is the quality of the dog. Faithfulness to the master. So the master pointed a gun at the dog, even though the dog had not done anything wrong, but still the dog just stood there. And the man pulled the trigger, shot the dog. Now, when the gunshot sound was heard, the baby who was below the bed began to cry. And then the man, Are, where is this sound coming from? And then he saw the baby was under the bed, alive. And so then he followed the trail of blood marks into the garden. And there he saw the dead mongoose. And then he realized what happened. That actually the mongoose had come to attack the child. The dog had placed the child below the bed and killed the mongoose. Too late. Wrong decisions. Wrong decisions could take away life. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada tells the story to indicate this point, that how the dog is very faithful to the master. And so the dog, he is not claiming proprietorship over his own body. He is thinking this body, or for the dog, he thinks, I belong to this master. And whatever the master wants to do with me, it is fine. And so the master, he thought of killing the dog for no good reason, but the dog just accepted. Okay, my master wants to kill me, it's fine. So that's the mentality of a devotee. Marovi rakovi jo ichha toham. So the devotee thinks, I'm Krishna's property. Whatever Krishna wants to do with this property, it's his property. So therefore, whatever he wants to do, it's up to him. Right? That's the highest platform of surrender. Manasa dehogi yokichu mora arpilu tuapade nandakishu. Nothing is mine. It's all yours. So that's the mode of a devotee that Srila Prabhupada is describing over here. No sense of proprietorship. He doesn't think that anything belongs to me. So yes, so we take care of the body. Therefore, Prabhupada has also given the example of the machine. So we need to take care of the body, understanding that it is Krishna's property. So whatever requires to be done, requires to be done. But at the same time, if Krishna decides to destroy this body, what can be done? Then one simply submits to Krishna's plan, Krishna's will. And therefore, for maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. Because he thinks, okay, whatever Krishna supplies, that's fine. There's no question of unfair means of accumulating money. So unfair means of accumulating money are required for what? Yes, for sense gratification. So when one thinks, oh, I require more money for my needs, even though Krishna is not supplying the money, but I'm going to try different ways, beg, borrow, steal, but I'm going to get the money. So if one thinks that way, then one is bound to be affected by sinful reactions. So you see that Krishna is speaking about a Nishkam Karma Yogi. Of course, this is an advanced Nishkam Karma Yogi. But then those principles very much apply to the life of a devotee. So at least we must try to follow the principles of a Nishkam Karma Yogi. When we talk of Bhakta, Prabhupada is speaking about devotee. But then devotee means he thinks about pleasing Krishna. That's on the transcendental platform. Pleasing Krishna, loving Krishna. But at least one needs to follow the principles of a Nishkam Karma Yogi. So the important point is that these are all very important. Otherwise, one will simply be bound in so many reactions. Unfortunately, we do find, even in the society of devotees, sometimes So many illegal ways, illegal means to accumulate money, earn money, sometimes cheating, this, that, so many things. We have seen it practically in every place. And sometimes so much of misunderstandings, quarrels, breaking of relationships because of this. Court cases because of this. Illegal ways of accumulating money. Sometimes even murder. So therefore, very important that one tries to follow these principles. Ultimately, if not today, tomorrow, I have to give up this body. So why so much of struggle and sinful activities just for the sake of maintaining the body which is not mine? Some important points. 22. Yadrichālābha santushto dvandvātīto vimatsaraha samasiddhau asiddhau cha kritvapi na nibhadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of his own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport?
A Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge.
So you see that all these symptoms are visible because the Nishkam Karma Yogi is detached from the fruits. So you see, attachment to the fruits is a cause of a lot of problems. The moment one is detached from the fruit, so many problems go away. So therefore, because he's not attached to his fruit, so therefore, yadricha labha santushto. So how much of a fruits, results, money Krishna gives, whatever comes of its own accord. Yadrichaya means whatever comes of its own accord by destiny, santushta. Santushta satatam yogi. So he's satisfied. And as Prabhupada writes, that he's satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accords. He labors honestly as far as in his power and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He doesn't go into the zone of prayas. Nectar of instruction. Atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. So the moment one is overly attached to the fruits for oneself, one tends to go into the zone of prayas. So even within Krishna consciousness, the same principle applies. So if one is overly attached to the fruits, I want the results somehow or other. Results have to be there. So then even in preaching, So then one may over endeavor at the cost of one's basic sadhana and health. And sometimes these things happen. So, anyway, at one point of time, there was some such prayas going on here in youth preaching. So some preachers became a little over enthusiastic, and they were going out late nights to get the boys, because boys are available only at night. And then when they go late night, then what's the obvious result in the morning? Yes, can't get them in the morning. So these preachers were doing like that. And so when Radheshyam Prabhu came to know about it, Radheshyam Prabhu very clearly told them, we don't want this preaching. We don't want this preaching. First, it is better to save ourselves. If we don't save ourselves, then what are we going to preach to others? So then after some days, I won't be there, nor will the new people be there. Then what have I achieved? Nothing. Simply prayers. So sometimes these things happen when one is not satisfied with the results. One goes into the zone of prayers, compromising one's spiritual sadhana, one's physical health, mental health. So many things get compromised. And of course, in the history of our movement, this has gone a long way, a very long way, to sometimes sannyasis giving up sannyas because of this, because of not focusing on their own spiritual standards in the name of preaching. So therefore, the important point is to have the appropriate balance and not be over enthusiastic for the results. So one has to know, what is my capacity? How much can I do? So one has to be honest and humble enough to accept what are my limitations. And this is my capacity. I can do this much. But at no point of time can I compromise my own sadhana, spiritual sadhana, and my physical health. Then nothing, if those are compromised, then no service is done. No service can be done. Then nothing is achieved. So therefore, a very important principle, yadricha labha santushta. Okay, whatever according to Krishna's plan, whatever results one gets with, of course, Prabhupada has also clarified, one must act according to the best of one's ability, putting one's full endeavors according to one's capacity. Then whatever results come, then one is satisfied. Srila Prabhupada describes that this is especially one of the Brahmanical qualities. Later on in the 17th chapter, Krishna describes that this is austerity of the mind, santushtaha, austerity of the mind. So the nature of the mind is more, 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 more. This is under the influence of Rajogun. So therefore, in the conditioned state where Rajogun is very prominent, as an austerity, one has to tell the mind, Shanti, be satisfied. And Srila Prabhupada gives his own experience when he was staying at Allahabad. So he tells of a Brahmin couple who were sort of neighbors, staying close to where he was staying. And he describes what was their lifestyle. Anyone heard this lecture? So he describes what was their lifestyle, husband and wife. So early in the morning, they would wake up, they would go to the Triveni Sangam, take their baths, and then they would come back. And the man would perform a lot of pujas, rituals, sort of religious activities for quite a few hours he would be doing. And the wife would do household chores, household work she would do. And so by the time the man would perform all his religious activities, it would be almost afternoon, almost noon. So then noon time, then it's time for lunch. So then they would have lunch. After lunch, the man would take a nap. And in the meantime, the wife would cook a number of eatables, variety of eatables she would cook. And the man would take his nap, get up. It's almost evening. And then both husband and wife would set up a small stall in front of their house and sell those eatables. And there were a lot of colleges there, Allahabad, and many students in that area. And so many of the students, as we know, you can, all these places, wherever students are there, so many cafes and eateries and all sorts of things. So then people, these boys, these students will come and they buy and they eat. And that's how their business would go on till about 9, 10 o'clock. They would sleep. This was their daily routine. And how much ever they got, they would be satisfied. So this is a simple lifestyle of a Brahmana. Prabhupada tells the story to describe that how a Brahmana is satisfied. No over endeavor. No over endeavor. Okay, some endeavor, whatever satisfied. And I think so in one of the previous classes we quoted Lord Vamandev. Yes. So there, Lord Vamandev, what does he say? If a Brahmana is not satisfied, what will be the result? His knowledge will be? Yes. His spiritual knowledge will diminish, just like putting water on fire. Why? What's the connection? What's the connection between spiritual knowledge and satisfaction? Correct. Correct. So in mode of passion, knowledge is not revealed. Sattvat sanjayate jnanam. Jnana only develops in sattvagun. So therefore, if one is hankering for more and more things, more and more material things, then the mode of passion will increase, material desires will increase. Then as one is chanting Hare Krishna, where the mind will go? All material desires in the mind. Very difficult to focus on spiritual activities. So therefore, it's very important. Yadricha labha santushto dvandvatito. He's not affected by the dualities because he's not attached to his body. So the bodily conception reduces, correct? We discussed. As the karma yogi advances, he develops more and more knowledge that I am spirit soul, not the body. The bodily conception reduces. So when the bodily conception reduces, then he's not affected by the dualities. Dualities affect the body. Heat, cold, respect, disrespect, all this affect the body. The more one rises above the bodily conception, he's not affected. And vimatsara, what is the cause of envy? Yes, the basic cause of envy is dissatisfaction. I want something which somebody else has. That's when one becomes envious. So this man is satisfied. He is satisfied with what he has. Then where's the question of envy? So therefore, vimatsara, samasiddhau, asiddhau cha, success, failure, equipoised. And so such a person, kritvapi na nibhadyate, even though he's performing activities, he is not bound. So these are the symptoms of the advanced Nishkam Karma Yogi with Gyan.
One question, Prabhu. It's you told about how it is important to be satisfied in himself, but we
satisfied
also
materially,
satisfied,
not spiritually.
Yes, that was coming to, because we hear Prabhupada also, he always says double it, and we hear that in Krishna consciousness we need to have greed.
So satisfied materially, not spiritually. On the spiritual platform, what is the ticket to go back to the spiritual world? Laulyam ekalam mulyam. spiritual greed. That is required. On the spiritual platform, greed. I want to make more and more spiritual progress. I want to satisfy Krishna, Guru and Krishna more and more. Double the book distribution score, not so that my name is announced. For Krishna's satisfaction, Prabhupada's satisfaction.
We most of the time we confuse both the things. Means how can we find
That's the
balance?
problem. Because we are not yet pure. So because we are not yet pure, our desires are all mixed up. Little for Krishna, little for me also. Or little for Krishna, more for me. There is a mix. Therefore, it is called mixed devotional service. So then we have to come out of the mix. Otherwise, spiritual life, material life, everything mix, hodgepodge, khichdi, then it becomes difficult to progress. So of course, it's a gradual process, but at least we should know what is our goal. So yes, because we're not yet pure, there's every possibility to be contaminated by some material desires, but at least one should know this is not ideal. So at least one should endeavor to give up those material desires, come to a pure platform where one is only trying to satisfy Krishna. So gradually one should get purified.
That means preaching till late night and all those things, right? Book distribution. So if we develop lollim for Krishna, for his pleasure, like we'll go overboard and we'll work.
Correct.
That is fine.
And what about chanting for his pleasure? Japa.
Okay.
Attending Mangalarti for his pleasure. What about that? So, if you are able to go late nights and come for morning program in perfect good health, not in hallucination. So if one has that capacity, well and good. Prabhupada was sleeping 2-3 hours. Early morning, what he was doing? Dictating these purports with full concentration for the whole world. So if one can do that, one has that capacity, well and good.
And expectation, like there was a line, expect good or bad results. So for Krishna, we can expect good results.
For
right?
Krishna, it's all fine.
Good results.
Yes.
And then if the result does not come, we should not be satisfied, no?
If one does not get the good results, one should definitely introspect, find out why the good results didn't come. One can try to improve. One can do all that. But at the same time, one does not get into depression.
At least one thought will come that Krishna is not so much pleased by my endeavor,
Possible. So one can try and find out what are the reasons why the results have not come. Definitely one can do that. But not that one gets into depression and gives up the service only. Understood? No? Okay, we'll take this question before the break.
4.19 and 18 verses, you were telling that what is karma and akarma, it really depends on the consciousness of the worker. So let's take an example like a devotee is offering bhoga to the Lord. So maximum of the times our consciousness, because we want to eat and we have heard because Krishna takes away the sinful reaction, that's why we offer. So in that case, so now his consciousness is fruitive, but at the same time, because food is having karmic reaction, that's why we offer. So if his consciousness is fruitive, then what type of reaction he will get?
So therefore, there are 2 points here. One point is, as we were discussing, and this Govind was also asking that question. So see, so we are going through the phase of sadhana bhakti. We are still sadhakas. We are not totally pure. So there could be some contamination in what we are doing. But at least one must have a sincere desire that I want to get free of this contamination. That is the sincerity of the sadhaka. The sadhaka does not be satisfied with this contaminated devotional service. He does not try to justify his contamination. चलता है क्या करे हम तो साधक है. This is another thing. कलयुग के जीव है, बद्ध अवस्था है, क्या करे? So not this type of justification. Okay, I understand. I have my contamination, but at least one must have a sincere desire to get free from it. That is one point. The second point is, therefore, we don't offer any service directly to Krishna. The service goes through the Guru Parampara. And so therefore, that service gets purified by the Guru Parampara before it reaches Krishna. Then it becomes acceptable. Okay, one last question.
Puji, you said that verse number in 19 that the reaction of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Little bit more explanation.
Yes. So what is that fire? The fire is knowledge. Knowledge that I am offering the fruits of this activity to the Supreme. So one is performing the activity with knowledge that if I'm attached to the fruits, there'll be bondage. So therefore, I'm offering the fruits for the Supreme. So when one performs the activity with that knowledge, then the Supreme nullifies the reactions to the work. Then the reactions get burnt up. But then if one doesn't have that knowledge, and then one tries to enjoy the fruits of his work, the attachment to the fruits is a cause for bondage. See? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, 10 minutes break. Verse 23. Gata sangasya muktasya jnanavastita chetasah yajnaya charata karma samagram praviliyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Purport.
Purport. Becoming fully Krishna consciousness, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminants of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in a relationship with Krishna. And thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his work are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, Krishna. The resultant action to all such a work certainly merge into transcendence and one does not suffer material effects.
Okay. So anyway, just one. So how many will be going online next week? Achha. So both of you fully online. Okay. So rest will be there. Huh? That's what I'm asking. Those who are online. So 3, okay, fine. He already went. Where he went? He was saying some camp. Okay. Anyway, some will be there here. Okay. I mean, of course, it doesn't make a big difference. Okay, fine. So here, Krishna is saying, Gata sangasya muktasya. If one is liberated from the modes of material nature and is situated in jnana, avastita chetasa. So when he's situated in knowledge, Then how he performs his work? Yajnaya acharata karma. He performs his work for yajna, or the Supreme. And by doing so, samagram praviliyate, his work merges into the Supreme. So Prabhupada is giving a very clear understanding of the verse. And Srila Prabhupada says that, so if one is Krishna conscious, he becomes liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relation with Krishna. And consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primal Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person. And the resultant reactions to all such work merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. All right? So that's the basic understanding. So that's what the Nishkam Karma Yogi does. So when the Nishkam Karma Yogi, he performs his work in knowledge. So now we are talking about a very advanced Nishkam Karma Yogi who has proper knowledge, proper gyan, that the work has to be done, but the results have to be sacrificed for the Supreme. So when he does his work in that consciousness, then all the resultant reactions of his work are taken by the Supreme. So that's what he says, they're merged into transcendence. So he doesn't get any reactions for his work because he's performing that work for the satisfaction of the, or at least he's sacrificing the results of his work for the Supreme. Okay. So then when he's performing the work for the Supreme, he's sacrificing the results for the Supreme, then that work becomes a yajna, becomes a sacrifice. All right. So this is the Nishkam Karma Yogi. Okay, again, this is from Surrender to Me. Please read.
The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in the transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Here, Srila Prabhupada translates Yajnaya as for the sake of Yajna, Krishna. Our work is automatically situated in transcendence when it is performed as sacrifice for Krishna's pleasure. Krishna will describe a variety of sacrifices in the following verses because this sacrifice has transcendental knowledge. The theme of this chapter as their ultimate goal. We should not underestimate the importance of acquiring transcendental knowledge. Knowledge about Krishna, the Jivatma, the material world, and the process of devotional service solidifies our devotional practices. Taha
Vistarita hoya phale prema phala iha mali sheche nitya shravanadi jal.
The devotional creeper greatly expands in the Golok Vrindavan planet, and there it produces the fruits of love for Krishna. Although remaining in the material world, the gardener regularly sprinkles the creeper with the water of hearing and chanting. Cultivating Krishna conscious knowledge is therefore essential. Only then can knowledge and work be combined so that one's work becomes a sacrifice to Krishna.
Yes, so Gurujan Prabhu is explaining that how, that's why acquiring some knowledge according to one's capacity, acquiring some knowledge is essential. So then one becomes clear as to why one should work, how one should work, what should be the consciousness while working. So all this becomes clear. And then it's not simply a mechanical activity that one performs. So it should not happen that, okay, instead of working outside, then one has joined another company called ISKCON. So it should not happen like that. So then one does not get much more benefit than working in the outside company. So if one wants the actual benefit, as is being described over here, and that is getting free from the resultant reactions of work, if that effect one has to experience, then performing the work with the right consciousness is something which is very important. And that's why the whole purpose of our hearing and chanting is for what? For what? Pleasure of Krishna, no doubt. What is he saying? Huh? To develop the right consciousness. So to develop that right consciousness while working, the hearing and chanting is required, so that we are not doing the work simply mechanically, but we're trying to do the work for the pleasure of Krishna, for the satisfaction of Guru, Vaishnavas. And then when one is in that right consciousness, then there will also be a quality of the work. It won't be just mechanical. And then one gets the aspired result or benefit. And so that's the same point he is explaining in a more graphical way in the next verse. So in this verse, as Prabhupada has already indicated, he says that all his works are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person. So therefore, in the next verse, he shows how every work can be a sacrifice. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmeva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina. This verse is actually the essence of this whole chapter. This is like the crux of the whole chapter. A person who's fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport.
Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for present, just the principles of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in the material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such environment. The process by which conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to the overindulgence in the milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness is set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or the activities, sacrifices simply meant for satisfaction of the Vishnu or Krishna. The more activities of material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental bodies are called Brahmajyoti. His spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahmajyoti. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the results are all combined together. Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by the Maya is called matter. Matter total for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such a transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or the sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer, or the leader of the performance, and the result or the ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is a method of Krishna consciousness.
So here, Krishna is speaking in terms of a yajna, correct? Fire sacrifice. So what are the various components of the fire sacrifice? Brahma arpanam, there is arpanam, there is a contribution that is put into the fire, correct? What is that contribution? Havi. Havi means butter. Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havi. Where is the Havi put? Agni. Brahma Agnau. Who is performing the sacrifice? Brahmana. Brahmana Hutam. So, why the word Brahma is used for each of these components? To indicate that everything is spiritual. That means in the fire sacrifice, when everything is being done with a spiritual consciousness, with a spiritual motive, everything becomes spiritualized. So there are three main aspects of the sacrifice. There is a contributor, the one who's performing the sacrifice. There's a contribution, what is being put into the sacrifice, and there is a consuming agent, right? So the contributor is the Brahmana, the contribution is the butter, and the consuming agent is fire. These three components are there for the sacrifice. So what Krishna is saying is that if all of them are Brahman, that means spiritual, they're being done, the entire fire sacrifice is being done with spiritual consciousness for a spiritual goal. So then he says, Brahmeva tena gantavyam. Since everything is spiritual, everything is being done with a spiritual motive, then what will be the gantavya? What will be the destination of such a person? That will also be spiritual. Correct? Brahmeva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. Because he is absorbed, he is in samadhi. His karma is samadhi in Brahman. Because he is totally focused on satisfying the Supreme through his karma. So if one is fully focused, he's in samadhi, how to satisfy the Supreme through his sacrifice, the result will also be what? Brahman. The result will also be spiritual. So therefore that word Brahma, 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 Brahma is used. So one should not be put in Brahma. So the meaning of the word Brahma here is spiritual. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada is beautifully explaining with the help of this analogy of the milk and the curd. The same example is also given by Narad Muni in the first canto of the Bhagavatam. So why this example is given? So just like the person gets disease due to milk, so the milk is the cause of the disease, correct? Milk is the cause of the disease. But that same milk with a slight transformation becomes the cure for the disease. Similarly, work in the material world is a cause for bondage. But that same work, a little transformation is required. What is that? Spiritual consciousness. That same work, when done in spiritual consciousness, becomes the cause for liberation. That is why that analogy is. Therefore, Prabhupada writes, the more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness of a Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahma or Brahman means spiritual. And further down, Prabhupada writes, this material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent, and all of them become Brahman or the absolute truth. And further down he says, Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman or Supreme. And then anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna or sacrifice for the absolute. So this is the central theme of this chapter. The central theme is that when work is performed in spiritual consciousness for the satisfaction of the Supreme, that results in a spiritual goal. And Srila Prabhupada, so many times he gives the examples, just like this microphone. Is it material or spiritual? Depends on the purpose for which it is used. So in other purpose, Srila Prabhupada has written, from an absolute viewpoint, actually everything is spiritual. Because everything is coming from Krishna. So everything is spiritual. But what makes it material is the consciousness with which it is used. So therefore, what Krishna is trying to tell here in this chapter is, when the activity is performed in knowledge for the satisfaction of the Supreme, then the activity also becomes spiritualized and the destination will also be spiritual. Clear? So now, okay, fine. So now in the next section from 25 to 33, Krishna gives a list of sacrifices. He gives a list of sacrifices. So he gives a list of various activities and how they can actually be made into sacrifices. So just is a summary of this section. In the next 9 verses, 25 to 33, Krishna will explain to Arjuna that transcendental knowledge ultimately about Krishna is to be obtained through these sacrifices and austerities, all of which are typical of Vedic culture. So the principle is, when the activity is performed in knowledge as a sacrifice, it results in more knowledge. Right? When the activity is performed as a sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Supreme, then it results in more knowledge. Because by performing the activity in knowledge, it results in what? When the activity is performed in proper knowledge for the satisfaction of the Supreme, it results in purification. It results in purification. And the more one is purified, the more knowledge one gets, the more realization one gets. So that is what he's saying. Transcendental knowledge is to be obtained through these sacrifices. So first of all, one performs the activity in knowledge for the satisfaction of Supreme as a sacrifice. When it is performed in knowledge, it results in more knowledge. Okay? So that is the theme of this entire section. Okay, 25. Devam eva pare yagyam yogina paryupasate brahmagnava pare yagyam yagyene Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them. And some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. So here he is describing 2 types of sacrifices. What are they? One is worship of the demigods. So that is also a sacrifice. Correct? Of course, for worshipping the demigods, actual fire yajna is performed. To worship the demigods, ahuti is given to the demigods through the fire sacrifice. So in this case, who is the contributor? Yes, the person who is worshipping the devatas. He is the contributor in the sacrifice. What is the contribution? Yes, so whatever he offers into the sacrifice, or he offers some gifts to the devatas, some offering to the devatas. And what is the consuming agent? The devatas. The devatas are the consuming agent because the offering is going to them. So that is one type of sacrifice. What is the other type of sacrifice? So these are the impersonalists. The impersonalists. So the impersonalists, they are also performing a sacrifice. So who's the contributor? The impersonals. What is his contribution? What is contribution? What is his goal? Merging, right. So what is the contribution? Himself. The contribution is himself into the fire of impersonal Brahman. That is also a sacrifice. So you can see Prabhupada is writing this. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of the demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifice in terms of different categories. Okay. So factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the supreme Lord Vishnu, is also known as yajna. And all the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. That Krishna tells later on also. Say that? Yeah, so whatever they offer into the yajna, we'll come to that. So further on, Prabhupada is writing, those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to Vedic rituals. They are called Bhuvishwaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others who worship the impersonal feature of the absolute truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire. You read that? And end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. And such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. So that's also another sacrifice that they're doing. They're sacrificing their time. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations, that is, his material designation means that the designation of the body. They sacrifice that because they realize that I'm spirit soul. So they sacrifices material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalists, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. Clear? The consuming agent is Brahman. That's what Prabhupada is writing now. Fire of Brahman. So they are offering themselves into the impersonal Brahman. The Krishna conscious person like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is first class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Okay? So this is two types of sacrifices Krishna has described.
And then the contribution is his self. And then who is a one who's offering the sacrifice? He himself.
Yes. Yes, he himself is offering his own self. That's what Prabhupada is writing, na? Okay, 26. Shrotra dinendriyan yanye sanyamagnishu juvati shabdadin vishayan anya indriyagnishu juvati. So you can see everywhere Agni is coming, right? Sanyam agnishu, indri agnishu. Agni. So all these are being compared to sacrifices. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. And others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Okay, read this purport.
The members of the four divisions of the human life, namely the brahmacharis, the grihastha, the vanprastha, and the sannyasis, are all meant to become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratifications like animals, the four orders of the human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmachari or student under the care of a bona fide spiritual master control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Harer Namanu Kirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibration of the material sound, and his hearing is engaged in transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householder who have some license for sense gratification performs such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies for human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratification. Marriage on the principle of religious life. Religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency toward the sense gratification for higher transcendental life.
Okay, so here Krishna is describing two types of sacrifices, one for the brahmacharis and the other of the grihasthas. So what do the brahmacharis do? Shrotra adini. Shrotra adini. The emphasis is given to shrotra, hearing. So therefore for brahmacharis, one of the important duties of the brahmacharis is hearing. And of course, study of the shastras, swadhyay. These are important duties of the brahmacharis because that's how the brahmacharis can control their senses. So therefore, shrotra adini, indriyani, and anye, other senses also, sanyama agnishu juvati. So the brahmacharis, they offer all the senses in the fire, agni, in the fire of what? Sense control, sanyama. They offer all the senses in the Sanyama Agnishu Juvati. So that means they don't allow the senses to come in contact with the sense objects. So that is the yajna for the brahmacharis. That is the sacrifice for the brahmacharis. Okay. So they do that sacrifice for the purpose of what? Pleasing the Supreme. Okay, for pleasing the Supreme, the brahmacharis do this sacrifice. It is a sacrifice. Why it is sacrifice? Because it is for the pleasure of the Supreme. Therefore, it is a sacrifice. Yajna. And similarly, what do the grihasthas do? Vishayan anya indriya agnishu juvati. So the grihasthas, what they offer the vishaya in the fire of the senses. So they are allowing the sense objects to come in contact with the senses, but in a regulated way. So that is their yajna, that is their sacrifice. Okay. So all these activities, when they are performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme, it becomes a yajna. Becomes a yajna. Okay, 27. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma sanyama yogagnau juvati jnana deepite. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses Offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. So this is the process of Ashtanga Yoga that he's speaking about, okay, especially pranayama. So Prabhupada is talking about the Patanjali Yoga system. In the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali soul is called Pratyak Atma and the Parag Atma. As long as soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called as Parag Atma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it's called as Pratyak Atma. So according to this yoga system, Pratyak Atma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyak Atma is withdrawn from activities and matter. Okay, so this is the process of Ashtanga Yoga. So they are also trying to control all the senses and the mind, ultimately to achieve the supreme. So therefore, it is also a sacrifice. 28. Dravya yajnastapo yajna yoga yajnastata pare swadhyaya jnana yajnascha yataya samshita vrataha. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of the Eightfold Mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. So here, Krishna is speaking about these 4 types of yajnas. First is Dravyamaya Yajna, Dravya Yajna. So what is Dravya Yajna? Sacrificing one's possessions. Sacrificing one's possessions. So Prabhupada gives examples in the purport. So he says that there are persons who are sacrificing the possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community or princely orders open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Annakshetra, Atitishala, Anathalaya, and Vidyapeeths. Many hospitals, old age homes, charitable foundations. So all are called as Dravyamaya Yajna. They are sacrificing their material possessions. But again, the point is, it all depends on what is the consciousness with which they're doing. Of course, there is definitely some spiritual goal. They want to serve the humanity, they want to serve all the jivas. But of course, what is the realization of the jivas as parts and parcels of the Supreme? Depends upon that. So if it is performed with the proper knowledge that we are trying to help these human beings because they're parts and parcels of Krishna. So if they have that spiritual knowledge and they have spiritual goals, then they will get a spiritual result. But the same activities can be performed for what? For punya, material punya, to get sense gratification. But then that means if they simply perform it as a material punya, then they're not going to get a transcendental benefit for that. So ultimately, everything depends upon what? The consciousness. Even the previous activities that Krishna spoke of, just like the Ashtanga Yogi. So the Ashtanga Yogi is performing his yam, niyam, asana, pranayam and all that. But as Prabhupada explains, very often what is the goal of these yogis? Siddhis. So then it simply becomes a material goal. Then it is not a yajna. Then it is not a yajna. When it becomes yajna, satisfaction of the Supreme, then it becomes yajna. So all these yajnas that Krishna is describing, they can also be done with a material purpose and a material goal. Then it does not become yajna. So that's the point. So then, tapo yajna, various tapasyas. Prabhupada is giving examples of Chandrayana, Chaturmasya, so severe vows. This is called Tapomaya Yajna. And then Yoga Yajna. Yoga Yajna is again Ashtanga Yoga. And then finally, Swadhyaya Yajna. So studying Upanishads, Vedanta Sutras, all this, Swadhyaya Yajna. So after this whole list, what Prabhupada writes, all these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifices and are seeking higher status of life. So why it becomes a yajna? Because they're seeking something higher. They're seeking something spiritual. Then it becomes yajna. So if that goal is not something spiritual, something higher, then it remains on the material life. So it all depends on what's the consciousness and what is the goal. And then again, Prabhupada brings in the point of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendent. Next verse is again basically pranayam 29. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others curtailing the eating process offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. So as Prabhupada begins the purport by saying the system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayam. And in the beginning, it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. So Prabhupada is basically talking about this. But then again, every purport Prabhupada comes to Krishna consciousness at the end. Therefore, Prabhupada writes, a Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage and is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there's no falling down. And ultimately, he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. 30. Sarve apyeti yajño vido yajña kshapita kalmashaha yajña shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere. So in this verse, Krishna is speaking about the effects of performing yajna. So two effects of performing yajna. What are they? Yajna kshapita kalmashaha. One effect of performance of yajna is all the sinful reactions are destroyed. Yajna kshapita kalmashaha. And the second result is yanti brahma sanatanam. One approaches the supreme spiritual atmosphere. So these are the two effects of the practice of yajna. One becomes purified, and by becoming purified, one gradually proceeds towards the supreme Brahman. No, here Krishna is speaking about in general. In general. Now, where exactly the person goes, that depends upon what is his goal and what is his consciousness. But here Krishna is speaking about in general. So as Prabhupada writes towards the end of this purport, all the above mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, not only does one become happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end, he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So that depends on the person. 31. So this is a one-line verse. Nayam lokasti ayajñasya kuto anya kuru sattama. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. Then what then of the next? So this we discussed in the 3rd chapter also, isn't it? There also Krishna spoke, if you want even the material necessities of life, one must perform work. That's one thing. Sacrifices to devatas, the demigods. In the 3rd chapter, Krishna said, no? Parasparam, what is that? Yes, so he said that by offering sacrifices to the devatas will provide all your material necessities, and that's how you can live happily in this life, at least in this life. So without performing some yajna, no one can live happily even in this life. What to speak of the next? That's what Krishna is saying here. And that's what Prabhupada is explaining in the purports. By the performance of yajna, I'm reading in almost in the middle of the purport. Where by the performance of yajna, we can have enough food, enough milk, etc., even if there's a so-called increase of population. When the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe, therefore, sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby, one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage, and the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life even in this body? And what to speak of another body or another planet? Okay. And ultimate, the last sentence. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. 32. Evam bahuvida yajna vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidditan sarvan evam gyatma vimokshase. All these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. So Krishna himself is saying again, Krishna himself has spoken about the different types of yajnas, but what is he saying? They're approved in the Vedas. Who gave the Vedas? Krishna only, but still, we mentioned this point before also. So Krishna also follows the system, Guru Sadhu Shastra. So here he is saying, don't think I'm only giving all these yajnas. I'm not giving them whimsically. They're there in the Vedas. Right. Okay. As Prabhupada writes here, different types of sacrifices discussed above are mentioned in the Vedas to suit the different types of worker. Because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence. But all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. So we can see that some of the sacrifices are sacrifice of the sacrifice with the body, like no, in this list of sacrifices, which are sacrifices performed with the body? Yes, basically dravyamay, tapomay. So these are sacrifices with the body. What are sacrifices with the mind? Huh? Yes, yoga yajna. Swadhyaya yajna is with intelligence. Ashtanga yoga is, of course, controlling both the mind and the senses. So in this way, the sacrifices can be done with the body, with the mind, with the intelligence. And so depending upon one's level, one's elevation of consciousness, then they perform different types of yajnas. And then finally, Krishna says, Shreyan dravyamayad yajna jnana yajna parantapa sarvam kalma khilam sarvam karma khilam partha jnane parisamapyate. O chastise of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifice of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport?
The purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from the material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifice remains on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on difference in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruitive activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge.
Okay, so here Krishna is saying better than Shreyan Dravyamayad Yajna Jnana Yajna. So better than simply sacrificing material possessions is when the sacrifice is performed in knowledge. As Prabhupada is explaining that sacrifices before that. So those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge, for without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform, bestow no spiritual benefit. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. Right? So if one does not perform the activity in knowledge, then it simply remains material activity. So the same activity, when performed in knowledge for the satisfaction of the Supreme, then it actually becomes yajna. Right? So therefore, the important point here is that if we want a spiritual benefit, if we want to achieve spiritual goal, the activity must be done in what? In knowledge. And what is that knowledge? What is that knowledge? Satisfaction of the Supreme. Satisfaction of the Supreme. And so therefore, that 24th verse is the main principle that Krishna is discussing. That when the activity is done in Brahman, that means in spiritual consciousness, then the Gantavya, the destination, will also be spiritual. So much depends upon consciousness with which the activity is done. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada has named our society as International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So this consciousness is very important. So if the consciousness is not there, the activity simply remains material. That is why activities, are we doing some very special activities? No, most activities even outside people do. So whether it is selling books or making garlands or cooking or building, most of the activities even the outside people are doing. But what makes the activity spiritual? The consciousness with which it is done. So if that consciousness is not there, if you're not trying to cultivate the consciousness, then the activity per se will simply remain on the material platform. And therefore, to cultivate that Krishna consciousness, what is required? What is required? Yes. The hearing and chanting is to cultivate that spiritual consciousness. So therefore, if the regular hearing and chanting is not done, the activities will remain on the material platform. And then when the activity is done on the material platform, in material consciousness, then one does not progress in jnana. He does not get more knowledge. He remains on the material platform. And on the material platform means what? Rajogun, Tamogun. Rajogun, Tamogun means what? Ignorance. That is why Srila Prabhupada gave so much stress on Shravanam Kirtanam. Daily, Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya, every day, 2 classes, every day, 16 rounds chanting. So Srila Prabhupada gave the spiritual program and greatly emphasized it in all his books, lectures, letters. You see all of them. Great emphasis has been given on the spiritual program. We already told you those pastimes. Juhu. Srila Prabhupada greatly emphasized the spiritual program, because without the spiritual program, as we told in Juhu, Prabhupada said, no hearing, chanting, then what this will become? Hostel mess. Hostel mess. There's no difference. Therefore, the hearing and chanting is required, so that we are in spiritual consciousness. Oh, I am performing this activity for the Supreme, not for my sense gratification. And that is why we see when the devotees don't have that proper spiritual program, then gradually the consciousness degrades into material consciousness. And when the consciousness degrades to material consciousness, then all the material problems will come up in the spiritual society also. Same thing will come then. Then it's all fighting, pulling, pushing for material facilities, material sense gratification, pose, positions. Oh, you have more, I have less, I want this, I want that. That's what will happen. Because it's all in material consciousness. That's what happens in the outside world, correct? As they say, dog eat dog world. Kutton ka samaj. Oh, come into my territory, get out. That's what will happen then. Same thing. So therefore, that requires some endeavor to maintain the spiritual consciousness. Then the daily program, every day, has to do it properly. Then the more properly one does it, then more the consciousness will rise to spiritual consciousness. More the consciousness rises, more sattva, sattvat sanjayate, jnanam. That's how one gets more knowledge, more realization, and that's how one will make more progress. And therefore, the spiritual program is very important to maintain that consciousness. And that's what Krishna is concluding this section by saying, it is not simply the sacrifice of material possessions that is important, but what is better is when it is done in knowledge. And that is why the chapter is transcendental knowledge. And that is what the Nishkam Karma Yogi does. So the Nishkam Karma Yogi, he is sacrificing the fruits, correct? But the Nishkam Karma Yogi, because he sacrifices the fruits in knowledge, so when he does it in knowledge, he gets Gyan. And that's how the Nishkam Karma Yogi gradually progresses to Jnana Yoga. That's how he becomes Jnani. When he does it in knowledge, when he sacrifices the fruits of his activities in knowledge, the result is more knowledge. That's what happens. And the same principle applies for us also. We do an activity in knowledge, we purify our consciousness. With purified consciousness, one gets more knowledge. And if one does things in material consciousness means everything is in a material platform. Material platform means ignorance, and ignorance leads to more ignorance. That's how either things can go down or things can go. It all depends on the consciousness with which we perform an activity. All right. So now, the next question is, so we have to perform the activity with knowledge. Now, the next question is, from where the knowledge is going to come? So this is the last section, 34 to 42. This is almost a summary of the entire chapter, actually. So we'll go through it quickly. So from where can we get the transcendental knowledge? Tadviddi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninastatvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Please read the purport.
The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord Himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretender. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor by independent study of the books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for the spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following the absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind towards the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render the service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect.
Okay, so I'm sure you must have heard many lectures on this verse. There are some few sentences in the purport which are very important, which we would like to highlight. The first point which Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing is the principle of disciplic succession. The Guru has to be in disciplic succession. Then another important point he's saying is mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Okay, so that's in connection to receiving knowledge in disciplic succession. So if one is speculating arguments, then one cannot get the proper knowledge. The other important point is, nor by independent study of books can one progress in spiritual life. What is the example Prabhupada often gave? Independent study of books. Huh? Yeah, that's the people who do that, but an example. Okay, so just by reading books from, so Prabhupada would say, engineering and medical books are available in the market, in the bookstore. But by simply getting those books and reading, can one become engineer, doctor? No. So similarly, if that applies to material knowledge, then what to speak of spiritual knowledge? So books are available everywhere. So many books have been distributed. But still, it is not that simply by studying the books one can actually receive the knowledge. And when we speak of knowledge, it's not only theoretical knowledge that is being referred to, it is realized knowledge. Pustakiya Gyan or Anubhavi Gyan. So Anubhavi Gyan is called as Vigyan, realized knowledge. So when there's realization, there is conviction. Correct? To give a simple example, we'll be discussing these points, of course, in other verses also, but just to give a simple example. So just like I can give a perfect recipe of how to make a gulab jamun. Right. Every detail of the procedure, how to make. And everyone can memorize it also. But still, does it mean one will get the taste of gulab jamun? See, one can have some idea, correct? Because there is milk, there is sugar, there is ghee. So definitely it must be good. This much idea one can get, correct? But if you have never tasted it, how much would you be interested in having it? Not much. Okay, it seems to be some good. But if you taste it once, then what you get? Anubhav. You get the experience. And then when you get the experience of it, then nobody needs to tell you that gulab jamun is sweet. And no invitation is required. Automatically, if an announcement is made that gulab jamuns are being served somewhere in this campus, somehow one will find out. Why? Because one has got the experience that gulab jamun is sweet. So then one will somehow get it. That is the difference. So we can say so many things. Oh, Krishna consciousness is wonderful. There is so much of bliss, this, that. So many things we can say. But one has to get the experience. Therefore, we discussed param drishtva. Drishtva refers to experience. Experience. It is the experience which gives the higher taste. Therefore, one has to experience the bliss of Krishna consciousness by practicing Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, one cannot experience. Therefore, Prabhupada is writing, it's not simply about bookish knowledge. The other important point is, so such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. So you have all heard that story about the Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University, Madan Mohan Malviya. Yes, he went to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur with some questions, and Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur told him to wash the pots, help the pujari. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur is also so bold, na? Vice Chancellor of a university. So you can see how Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was not seeing on the material platform. For him, that Vice Chancellor post made no sense. He was seeing him as spirit soul and what is for his benefit. Therefore, he could do that. Otherwise, if somebody says, oh, Vice Chancellor, of course, we can't imitate. That's another point. But still, he was not seeing on the material platform. That Upadhi made no meaning to him. Therefore, he could engage him in that service. And then we know all his questions got answered simply by that service. So therefore, satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. That is the secret. That is the only way. And so therefore, unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. Important point. Sometimes people are very eager to ask questions, but they don't want to do any service. Then it's useless. They won't understand anything. So therefore, first one must render service, please the spiritual master, then the inquiries will make sense. Then the answers to those inquiries will make sense. One will be able to understand. And therefore, one must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master. As we see, Narad Muni tested Dhruva. And then he saw the determination of Dhruva. Then he gave him the process. When he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding, which is the pastime for this classic pastime. The guru blessing the disciple. Okay, fine. Okay, Gaur Kishodas Babaji Maharaj. Okay, we could take that. Yes, that's the classic pastime. Sandipani Muni was so pleased. He blessed them. What? What have you learnt in the ashram? Yes, remain fresh. That is the way to receive spiritual knowledge. By the blessing of the spiritual master, one can actually understand. It's not about theoretical knowledge. Yes, also Ishwar Puri, Madhavendra Puri, and Ramchandra Puri. And then blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. So you know that classic story from blind following, the guru and his disciples on the horse cart. Everyone knows the story, right? So that is blind following. Anything has fallen down, pick it up. So finally the guru got so frustrated, he gave list. What should be picked up and what should not be picked up. And finally the guru fell down, they took out the list. Oh, guru is not in the list, leave him. So that's height of foolishness. So not like that blind following. So one must use one's intelligence and absurd inquiries. You know that story, Prabhupada was traveling in the train. People came for Ashirwad. So absurd inquiries. Okay, we'll end the discussion with some Prabhupada quotes on these points. Please read.
Pariprashnena, Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam. One must be Jigyasu, very much inquisitive to learn from the bona fide spiritual master. The inquiries one makes should strictly pertain to understand
To transcendental science.
To transcendental
Okay,
science.
so Prabhupada would often say, not inquiries about what is price of rice and things like that. Okay.
Blind following means, oh, there is a Swami. So many thousands of people are following. Let me be his disciple. This is called blind following. You do not know what is that Swami, whether he is a Swami or a rascal. You do not know, but because everyone is going, oh, let me become his disciple.
Okay, so now you find all that, no? So many bogus swamis and so many thousands and some millions of people just following.
Absurd inquiries. Just like somebody goes to so-called spiritual master and he asks his spiritual master, can you show me God? And the spiritual master immediately showed him God. You see, this is a rascaldom, this rascaldom is going on. Suppose if you go to professor and if you say, oh, if you are a professor, can you make me immediately MA? And if he says, yes, why not? Then are you not a fool? You have to check it. You go to marketplace, you buy something. Suppose you purchase one knife. You know what is knife. If it must be a sharpened instrument. You see how it is cutting. You test it. Suppose if you go on to somebody to see God, how you will test it if you do not know what is God? Then he will give you supply you, deliver you one dog, and you understand this is God. So what is your testing power? And at least you must have some theoretical knowledge what is God. Sevaya, just like if you purchase something, you must pay for it. Therefore, it is called Sevaya. You cannot pay by returning the value, which is thought by spiritual master. That is not possible. Therefore, it is called Sevaya. Dedicate your life for this service. You cannot pay. What you have got to pay to spiritual master.
So therefore we can render some service, that's all. Okay, fine. So the remaining verses are quite simple, talking about what happens if one receives this knowledge from the spiritual master, what realizations he gets. That is described in the next few verses. So we'll continue on Monday and we'll finish the 4th chapter and then begin with the 5th. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.